I acquired a $2 million villa right on the ocean, yearning for serenity and calm. Yet, no sooner had my son-in-law discovered this, he called. "We're coming to you now," he declared. "There will be 15 of us. Have beds, towels, slippers, and food prepared. We're settling in for 3 weeks. We arrive in 40 minutes, so you best hurry, old woman." His audacity raged like a tempest, yet I found myself smiling as I devised a counterplan destined to invert the entire scenario. Before I continue with what happened, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, and perhaps leave a comment letting us know what time it is where you're reading this. The phone's piercing ring fractured the calm afternoon quiet, sounding like shattering glass on pavement. I carefully placed the crystal wine glass I was unpacking onto the counter and picked up my mobile, assuming it might be an old colleague calling to offer congratulations. Beyond the kitchen's expansive floor-to-ceiling windows, the Pacific Ocean unfurled in an endless blue, its waves lapping gently at the private shore beneath my new home. "Hello? Old woman, we're already driving to your place." Brian's voice assaulted my ear like a physical blow. No hello, no polite inquiry, just raw, unadulterated entitlement. "There are 15 of us, so get everything ready: beds, towels, slippers, groceries, the works. We're staying for 3 weeks. We'll be there in 40 minutes, so step on it." My fingers clenched the phone. 40 years of work in architecture, meticulous saving, and postponing my own desires, all culminating in this one moment of serenity in the house I'd always dreamed of. Unopened moving boxes still littered the marble counters, packing materials were strewn over surfaces that didn't even feel like mine yet. "Brian, hold on, I'm not even fully unpacked. The house is in no condition for..." "Listen, I'm not interested in what you're doing right now." His voice cut in with that recognizable air of breezy dismissal, as though my problems were just static on the line. "You're rich, which means you have the room. That's all there is to it." A refreshing ocean wind drifted through the open patio doors, bringing the aroma of salt and liberty, but Brian's pronouncement tainted the atmosphere. I grabbed the granite counter with my unoccupied hand, observing how pale my knuckles turned against the deep gray stone. "But Brian, I just moved in this week. I'm surrounded by boxes. I don't have guest bedding prepared." "Sort it out, old lady, you're retired, aren't you? What else is on your agenda?" I could hear the sound of engines revving on his end of the line. "Jessica has the kids' bags packed. Mike and Ashley are coming with their bunch as well. It's going to be a huge family get-together." Family get-together. The phrase felt like a corroded blade turning in my ribs. After all I had sacrificed, all I had provided, this was his perception of our connection, a single-lane road built entirely on my contributions and his expectations. "I require adequate time to prepare. Perhaps next month if..." "Next month?" Brian's laughter was biting and derisive. "We're already in the car, Eleanor, we're committed. You're not going to let the children down, are you? Jessica's been talking about Aunt Eleanor's amazing new beach house for weeks." "Aunt Eleanor. Not Grandma Eleanor, not even just Eleanor. Aunt." As if I were just some peripheral relation, duty-bound to supply amusement at his whim. The phone felt slick in my perspiring hand. "Brian, please, be rational. 3 weeks is an extensive visit, especially with 15 individuals. Quit being so theatrical. Family supports family, right? You taught me that." His voice oozed a self-satisfaction that sickened me. "Anyway, what good is having all that wealth if you won't share it with the people who count?" "The people who count." I shut my eyes, visualizing Emily's face. My beloved daughter, his late wife, the link connecting us, which her passing had incinerated 3 years prior. What would she make of this exchange? What would she say about her husband's tone, his entitlement, his utter lack of common decency? "Just make sure it's all set up by the time we get there. We're picking up beer, so clear out space in your refrigerator. Oh, and Jessica is planning to use your master bedroom. That one has the prime ocean view, doesn't it? We'll claim that one. My master bedroom. The one sanctuary I had fantasized about for decades, the one with the secluded balcony gazing out over the boundless Pacific. The very room where I intended to finally unwind, to savor the results of 40 years of prudent living and calculated sacrifices. The master suite will be perfect. We'll be there in 35 minutes. Don't make us wait on the doorstep. The call disconnected. I remained frozen in my sun-drenched kitchen, clasping the dead phone as if it were evidence. Outside the windows, seagulls wheeled above the breakers, their calls blending with the faraway rhythm of the tide. This was meant to be my haven, my compensation for a life spent prioritizing everyone else. My hands were still shaking faintly as I set the phone down. 35 minutes. 15 people. 3 weeks. The wine glass I'd been unwrapping captured the afternoon sun, casting colorful reflections onto the marble. Such a fragile object, lovely and delicate, much like the peace I believed I had finally secured. The phone slid from my anesthetized fingers, landing on the granite counter with a quiet tap. My legs felt weak as I moved into the living room, passing walls that were still blank, awaiting the art I had meticulously gathered over my lifetime. Everything was still packed away, my entire existence suspended between the past and the tranquil future I had envisioned. Emily's photograph smiled at me from the mantel, the single item I had unpacked immediately, requiring her presence in this new home. I lifted the silver frame, my hands trembling, and gazed at her warm brown eyes, the soft line of her mouth. 3 years had passed since the cancer claimed her, yet the pain was still raw. "Mom, Brian is genuinely looking for work," her voice resonated in my memory. "Can you please help us, just this one time?" Just this one time. Those 3 words evolved into the defining refrain of my association with Brian Miller. I collapsed into the plush reading chair I had angled toward the sea, holding Emily's picture in my lap. The afternoon light poured through the glass, but my thoughts turned to bleaker memories. The initial crisis emerged only 6 months after they were married. Brian's fledgling business venture had collapsed, leaving him jobless and buried under escalating credit card balances. $18,000. I had moved it from my retirement account, observing my meticulously crafted financial plan get pushed back by half a year. "You are so kind, Mom," Emily had murmured during dinner that evening. "Brian is grateful for all of it, even when he struggles to express it." But Brian never expressed it. Not when I financed his MBA program, $45,000 dispersed over 2 years, nor when I provided their mortgage down payment because his poor credit history prevented them from getting a good interest rate. $60,000 on that occasion, funds I had specifically set aside for my dream house savings. I pushed my fingers through my silver hair, recalling the distinct pattern that had formed. Every few months, a new emergency. Emily's medical expenses during her battle with cancer were, of course, entirely necessary. $85,000 I parted with willingly, desperate to save her life. Yet even during that time, Brian managed to center it on himself, whining about how the stress was impacting his professional performance. The ocean surf rolled in rhythmically, but what I heard was Brian's voice at Emily's funeral reception. "Well, at least we're free of all those medical debts hanging over our heads." I had felt physically ill that day, observing him schmoozing with the other mourners while I stood vigil by my daughter's coffin. Even profound loss, it appeared, was merely another chance for Brian to prioritize his own affairs. Once Emily passed away, I had anticipated the requests would cease. I assumed Brian would surely get on his own 2 feet, create his own financial security. On the contrary, they escalated: car maintenance after his warranty lapsed, property taxes he'd neglected to save for, an upgraded engagement ring for Jessica, because she merited something exceptional. I maintained a running total in my head, though I actively tried not to. $327,000 across 6 years. Enough to purchase a respectable home in many parts of the country, enough to guarantee a peaceful retirement, free from the monetary dread that, despite all my prudence, still jolted me awake at 3 in the morning. Rising carefully, I returned Emily's picture to the mantel and crossed the hall to my study. The view of the sea from this very room was what convinced me to buy the villa, an infinite expanse of blue reaching the skyline, offering tranquility and room to reflect. But now, my own reflection gazed back at me from the glass, an older woman who had dedicated 4 decades to constructing the dreams of others while her own were left to tarnish. The most painful part wasn't the cash. Money can be re-earned, re-saved, managed with greater care. The most painful part was the steady disintegration of respect, the creeping change from a generous mother-in-law into a walking bank machine. Brian's demeanor had morphed over time, from appreciative to demanding, from asking to ordering. This morning's phone call made it all painfully clear: no inquiry into my situation, my requirements, or my intentions. Only presumptions and directives disguised by a flimsy pretext of family duty. 15 individuals about to swarm my haven like a plague of locusts, ready to devour what had taken me decades to create. My fingers tapped an agitated rhythm on the windowsill as fury mounted within me, a simmering resentment I had stifled for far too long. Emily had always pleaded with me to be patient with Brian, to recall that individuals express affection in different ways. But Emily was no longer here, and Brian's interpretation of affection looked alarmingly like opportunism. The rumble of car engines from afar jolted me back to the present. It was distant but increasing in volume, several vehicles making their way up the winding seaside drive to my home. My 35 minutes of quiet had vanished more quickly than mist in the sun. I glanced at my watch. 3:15 p.m. Brian had certainly driven fast. From the study window, I could observe plumes of dust ascending from the private drive linking my villa to the main coastal highway. 4, perhaps 5, vehicles were advancing in a convoy, resembling an occupying force nearing its target. My teeth ground together as I observed their approach. This was no family visit, it was an invasion. A series of car doors slammed one after another, the noise reverberating off the villa's stone facade like reports from a gun. I walked from the study to the front entryway, peering through the sidelight windows as the 4 vehicles emptied their occupants onto my circular drive. Brian's black SUV was at the head of the procession, trailed by 2 other cars and a large pickup truck piled high with ice chests, beach gear, and sufficient baggage for a month-long trip. 15 people. Brian had been telling the truth. The heavy front door felt steady under my hand as I took hold of the handle, bracing myself for the impending confrontation. Through the frosted glass panel, I saw Brian step out of his SUV, acting like a warlord inspecting his new domain, wearing expensive sunglasses even in the afternoon shade, moving with that arrogant gait I had come to detest. Jessica spilled out of the passenger seat, her blonde hair flying in the sea air, instantly retrieving her phone to start filming. "Oh my goodness, everyone, look at this house." Her high-pitched voice traveled easily across the driveway. "It's just like a 5-star resort." I pulled the door open before they had a chance to ring, clinging to the slim hope of retaining some authority over the event. That hope vanished immediately. "How's it going, old woman? You like our little surprise?" Brian shouldered right past me into the entrance hall, not bothering to wait for an invitation, his gaze already sweeping the inside as if he were appraising its value. "Jessica, check it out, there's the hot tub I mentioned." "Brian, I explained on the call that I am not prepared for visitors." But my protest was drowned out by the pandemonium as the remainder of the crowd poured in behind him. A man I vaguely recognized as Mike, Brian's friend from college, gave a long, low whistle. "Man, she's loaded. Why wouldn't she share it with her family, huh?" Ashley, Jessica's sister, barged in next, dragging 2 enormous suitcases. "This location is ideal for our trip. The children will adore that swimming pool." She pointed toward my infinity pool, which was visible through the rear windows. "Children?" He had not mentioned any children during the call. "Stop being so theatrical, Eleanor." Brian had already traversed the foyer and was in the living room, his damp sandals trailing sandy grit across my imported Italian marble floor. "Family helps family. You're the one who taught me that, remember?" Even more people surged inside, some faces completely unfamiliar, mingling with a few I recalled dimly from Emily's funeral. A young man named Kevin, apparently someone's boyfriend, hauled in a large cooler of beer as if he were showing up for a fraternity bash. 2 women I was certain I had never met were already debating who would get which room, as though I was invisible. "Excuse me." I raised my voice, though it was nearly lost in the increasing noise. "Could everyone please just..." Oh, wow, you all need to see this kitchen. Jessica had found the gourmet kitchen I had spent months planning. She was holding her phone high, broadcasting live to her online audience. We're staying at my MIL's fabulous beach house. Check out this view. MIL. The acronym grated on my ears like sandpaper. Brian had never once called me mom, not even when Emily was alive. It was always Eleanor, deliberately keeping that separation. But Jessica had no problem claiming the family tie when it was convenient for her. One of them had located my audio system, and soon the house was vibrating with a heavy, pounding beat. Luggage and coolers materialized everywhere, dropped haphazardly in the entryway, leaned against my immaculate walls, staking claims on my sanctuary like flags on conquered land. Brian, we must discuss this. Later, old lady. Right now, we just need to get everyone situated. He started moving toward the corridor that led to the bedrooms, a procession of unknown people trailing him. Jessica and I are taking the master suite, naturally. Mike and Tracy can use the guest room facing the ocean. Ashley, you and Kevin can have the one with the private balcony. I moved directly in front of him, physically barring his path to the bedroom wing. The master bedroom is not available. That is my personal space. Brian laughed, a sharp, contemptuous sound. He put his hand on my shoulder, not as a kind gesture, but with the dismissive arrogance of someone shoving a piece of furniture aside. Come on, Eleanor, don't be greedy. We spent 4 hours in the car to get here. Jessica specifically requested the room with the best view for her morning yoga tutorials. The physical touch felt like an intrusion. I recoiled, but Brian just brushed past me, guiding his followers down the hallway that I had only inhabited, by myself, for 7 days. My hallway, in my home, bought with my savings and my aspirations. This is ideal. Jessica's voice rang out from my bedroom. The natural light in here is incredible for filming content. My private suite was being relegated to a set for her internet videos. Back in the living room, Mike had cracked open his cooler and was passing out beers. Ashley was busy shifting my furniture around to make better social spaces. A child, whose I didn't know, was sprinting on the pool deck soaking wet, leaving dark, wet footprints all over the limestone tiles I had paid a fortune to import from Portugal. The occupation was finalized. In under 10 minutes, my serene villa had been converted into a packed, chaotic rental property, my meticulous unpacking utterly ruined by the thoughtless mayhem of intruders who viewed my hard-earned assets as their birthright. I stood immobilized in my own entryway, feeling like an alien in my own home, observing people I hardly knew take possession of rooms I had fantasized about for decades. The ocean vista beyond my windows was still stunning, but it now served as the backdrop for an occupation, not a sanctuary. Brian reappeared from my bedroom, smiling, thoroughly pleased with himself. This is going to be the most epic 3 weeks. Jessica's already organizing a housewarming party for tomorrow evening. Hope that's okay, she already invited some more friends from her yoga class. Some more friends. My jaw set so firmly I worried my teeth would fracture. This was not a family gathering. This was a coup, and I was being swiftly downgraded from the owner of the house to the unpaid help in my own hard-won paradise. Jessica sauntered out of my master bathroom as if she held the deed, a fluffy white towel turbaned around her wet hair, leaving a trail of water spots across my imported marble flooring. She hauled her designer luggage with an air of entitlement, visually mapping out where to place her possessions in my personal haven. Excuse me, I stated, planting myself squarely in the bedroom entrance, arms folded over my chest. This room is not available. She stopped, looking genuinely taken aback by the opposition. Oh, don't be like that, Ellie, we already discussed this. The light in here is essential for my morning routine videos. No. The word was sharper than I had anticipated. Everyone must leave. Right now. Jessica's eyes grew wide in a display of feigned innocence. She moved her suitcase to her left hand and put her right hand on her hip, an expression I knew well from her online profile. Ellie, sweetie, we're family. Why are you acting so unwelcoming? Behind her, Brian materialized in the hallway, drawn by the conflict. His face soured as he saw me obstructing the entrance to the territory he had already mentally conquered. Eleanor, get out of the way. We've been in the car for hours. This is my house. I held my position, my voice gathering conviction. I need every one of you to get out immediately. Brian let out that same biting, scornful laugh. Your house? Is that right? Have you forgotten all that you owe our family? He advanced on me, deliberately crowding my personal space in a clear attempt at intimidation. Have you forgotten who the actual victim is in this situation? The actual victim. After more than $300,000, after 6 years of being financially drained, after handing over my daughter's inheritance and jeopardizing my own retirement funds, I was somehow the one in debt according to his warped logic. I owe you nothing. My hands were trembling, but not from fright. It was from a deep, suppressed fury that had been simmering for years. This discussion is finished. Jessica attempted to shoulder past me with her luggage, clearly believing my defiance was just for show. I moved again to block her way entirely, causing her to stagger back with a genuine cry of surprise. Ellie, that is so incredibly rude. The disturbance attracted the others from different parts of the villa. Mike showed up, beer in hand, with Kevin right behind him clutching a stack of my beach towels like prizes. Ashley came out of the guest bathroom, her face partially covered in makeup. The pounding music was lowered, and abruptly, the whole crowd was focused on our confrontation. Hey, what's your damage? Mike's voice had the easy condescension of a man who always got what he wanted. We're not breaking anything. You are trespassing. I scanned their expressions, seeing only baffled entitlement instead of the shame they should have felt. Every single one of you. Brian put his hand back on my shoulder with that sickening, patronizing air. Emily would be so disappointed in how selfish you'd become, old woman. That touch, uninvited, presumptuous, intended to belittle me, ignited something deep inside. I violently shrugged off his hand, shoving him with enough force that he stumbled. Don't you dare put your hands on me. My voice resonated with an authority I hadn't realized I possessed, making several of them flinch. And don't you ever invoke my daughter's name to excuse your avarice. Jessica's bottom lip started to quiver, a theatrical display I had witnessed many times before, usually when she desired a costly gift. Mama Ellie, we only wanted to have some time with you. We assumed you'd be thrilled to share this gorgeous house with your family. Mama Ellie? The nickname made my flesh creep. This woman, who had married my daughter's grieving husband, who had taken over the apartment I had helped pay for, who had even worn pieces of Emily's jewelry at her own wedding. She actually believed a sweet nickname could undo the sheer nerve of this home invasion. Thrilled? I gestured at the mess they had manufactured in just half an hour. You expect me to be thrilled that strangers are taking over my bedroom, rummaging through my kitchen, and treating my house like it's their all-inclusive hotel? We aren't strangers, Ashley objected, despite my certainty that we had never met. We're friends of Brian's, which makes us practically family. Practically family. The two words that supposedly served as an all-access pass to my existence, my bank account, and my sanity. Brian must have sensed the changing atmosphere, because he tried to seize control of the narrative. Look, Eleanor, I get that you're stressed out. Moving is a big deal. But we've arrived, we've already made our plans, and sending us away right now would cause significant issues for everybody. The menace was veiled, but it was absolutely clear. Significant issues for whom? For his buddies who had traveled for hours anticipating a complimentary beach vacation. For Jessica, who had guaranteed her online followers a stream of content from a high-end villa. For Brian, who had portrayed himself as the magnanimous relative offering his friends entry to his wealthy mother-in-law's estate. The only problem here, I stated, my voice surprisingly firm despite the adrenaline surging through me, is 15 people who believe they have the right to take over someone's home without an invitation. Without an invitation? Brian's facade of civility finally cracked. After all this family has endured? After everything you've put us through with your constant demands and expectations? Everything I'd put them through? 6 years of signing checks, handling their crises, financing their entire way of life, and I was the one making demands? Kevin pushed forward, his beer-fueled confidence radiating into the hall. Listen, Granny, maybe you just need to relax. We'll tidy up when we leave. No harm done. Granny. Yet another disrespectful slight from a man I didn't know, drinking beer he didn't buy in my private hallway. The crowd was unifying now, their posture changing from vaguely apologetic to openly defensive. It was 15 against 1, inside my own house. They had spent the entire car ride anticipating my compliance, basing their whole 3-week vacation on the assumption that I would just give in. Brian edged nearer again, his voice lowering to the familiar register he used for delivering final demands. You need to think very carefully about what you do next, Eleanor. Some choices are permanent. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once you've burned them. And there it was. The blatant threat, poorly disguised as concern for our relationship. Defy us and you'll lose us completely, as if their parasitic presence in my life was some great prize rather than an oppressive weight I had borne for far too long. I glanced from face to face, entitled, expectant, and clearly already figuring out how to twist this narrative to paint me as the villain. In their version of reality, I was the miserly, wealthy old woman who had forgotten her designated role in their pecking order of need. But as I stood there in my own corridor, physically defending the door to my own bedroom, I had a moment of profound clarity. Some relationships were already shattered beyond repair. Some had been illusory from the very beginning. The real issue wasn't whether I could bear the cost of losing them, it was whether I could survive the cost of keeping them. Brian's ultimatum lingered in the atmosphere like acrid smoke, poisonous and suffocating. 15 faces gazed at me, their expressions a mix of animosity and bewilderment, all awaiting my inevitable surrender. They had traveled for 4 hours anticipating easy submission, not a direct challenge. You are correct about one thing, I said, finally moving away from the bedroom entrance. Some choices are indeed irreversible. I pivoted and walked with purpose toward my study, retrieving my mobile phone from my pocket as I went. From behind me, Jessica's voice escalated in a dramatic plea. Where are you off to? We need to discuss this like rational adults. Like rational adults. This, from a woman who had just spent half an hour taking selfies in my bathtub for her followers. She's finally seeing reason, I heard Brian whisper to Mike. Probably going to call her lawyer to write us out of the will or some other melodrama. The study door felt solid and safe as I shut it firmly behind me, twisting the lock until I heard the satisfying click. This room was my haven, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves holding my old engineering texts, dominated by the massive oak desk where I had meticulously planned my retirement finances. Outside the window, the Pacific stretched on, entirely indifferent to the human drama unfolding. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's professional, calm voice helped to steady my nerves. I require police assistance. There are individuals in my house who are refusing to leave after being asked. Ma'am, are you in immediate physical danger? Beyond the study door, I could make out urgent, hushed voices and the sound of pacing. They were regrouping, figuring out their next move. Not at this moment, but they are refusing to vacate my property even after I've told them multiple times. Can you confirm that this is your legal residence, ma'am? Yes, I am the owner. I purchased it last month. I have all the documentation. The title papers were right there in my desk drawer, official proof of ownership that suddenly felt incredibly valuable. A heavy pounding began on the study door. Eleanor. Brian's voice was saturated with a forced, jovial tone. Come on out now, let's talk about this like reasonable people. Ma'am, how many people are involved? The operator's questions adhered to standard procedure, and every query reinforced the fact that I was the one with the legal right here. 15 people. They showed up uninvited about an hour ago and are refusing to go, despite my repeated requests. The pounding grew louder. Jessica's voice now joined Brian's, high, shrill, and sickeningly sweet. Mama Ellie, please don't do anything reckless. We can sort this out. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Are you able to stay in a secure room until they arrive? Yes, I'm in my study, and the door is locked. The sheer relief in my own voice was startling. After an hour of being outnumbered, dismissed, and overruled, someone was finally validating my concerns as legitimate. Estimated time of arrival is 15 to 20 minutes. Please stay on the line if you feel you are unsafe. Through the thick door, I could hear the group's hushed discussion becoming more agitated. I heard someone suggest they should just get out of there before things got worse, but Brian's voice sliced through the doubt with his typical arrogance. She's bluffing. Eleanor doesn't have the backbone for this. She'll be out here in 5 minutes, apologizing to us. The backbone. After 40 years of work in engineering, after establishing a career that had provided for everyone in my orbit, after repeatedly setting aside my own dreams for their comfort, he dared to question my backbone. Thank you, officer. The police are en route. I disconnected the call and leaned back into my leather chair, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't felt all day. The assault on the door escalated from pounding to outright hammering. Open this door right now. Brian's veneer of civility had completely disintegrated. This is a family matter, not something for the police. But it wasn't a family matter. Family doesn't stage an invasion. Family doesn't trample on clearly stated boundaries. Family doesn't issue threats when their attempts at exploitation are finally met with resistance. Eleanor, please. Jessica's voice cracked, and it might have even held a note of genuine panic. How can you treat us like this? We trusted you. They trusted me. Yes, they trusted me to provide unending access to my finances. They trusted me to absorb all their self-inflicted problems without a word of complaint. They trusted me to be grateful for the honor of being systematically used. Mike's voice then joined the chaotic chorus from the hallway. Lady, this is nuts. We're just trying to enjoy a vacation. A vacation. Entirely at my expense, inside my home, and utterly without my permission. The casual, profound entitlement in his statement crystallized exactly what was so wrong with this entire scenario. Through the study window, I watched the seagulls dipping and soaring above the waves, completely free and unburdened. For 4 decades, I had been the designated provider, the problem fixer, the dependable wellspring of solutions for every crisis they had. When exactly had I been recast as the villain, simply for desiring peace within my own home? The hammering on the door reached a frantic peak and then abruptly ceased. The pounding was replaced by urgent, hushed tones. They must have realized their tactical mistake. Yelling threats and demands while I was on the phone with the police was not, in fact, strengthening their position. Eleanor? Brian's voice had changed again, this time adopting a tone of wounded confusion. We just need to understand what's upsetting you. Why are you this furious with us? What was upsetting me? 6 years of being treated like a bank, an hour of a hostile home invasion, 15 strangers trying to claim my bedroom, drinking my beverages, and scheduling my life for me. The very question itself was proof of how little he comprehended, or cared about, basic human decency. My phone started vibrating with text messages. Brian had evidently opted for a 2-pronged assault. Emily would want us to be together right now as a family. You're tearing apart relationships that can never be fixed. Think about what you're doing to innocent people who only want to spend time with you. Innocent people. I deleted the texts without bothering to read the rest. Footsteps retreated from the door as the group pulled back to formulate a new strategy. Through the walls, I could pick up bits of heated arguments. Some voices were advocating for leaving immediately, others were insisting they should hold their ground. Jessica was sobbing again, though this time it sounded less like a performance. 15 minutes. The police would be here in 15 minutes, and this entire suffocating nightmare would finally be over. I had spent decades dodging conflict, placating egos, and writing checks to make problems vanish. Today, for the very first time, I had called for backup instead of just capitulating. The feeling was equal parts terrifying and wonderfully liberating. Outside, I heard car engines start. A portion of the group was clearly cutting its losses, having no desire to explain their vacation plans to law enforcement. But heavier footsteps lingered in the hall. Brian and his core followers were not backing down. The sound of distant sirens began to cut through the air, making my heart pound with anticipation, not dread. Help was arriving. The sirens grew steadily louder, slicing through the quiet afternoon air like the sound of approaching judgment. Outside my study, the urgent whispering dissolved into panic strategizing. I heard footsteps scattering as the reality of the situation finally punctured their self-absorbed bubble. "Everyone just act normal," Brian's voice commanded, attempting authority, but I could detect the tremor of fear beneath it. "Let me take care of this. It's all just a simple misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. 15 uninvited people occupying a home and refusing to leave wasn't a misunderstanding, it was criminal trespassing. But Brian's entire existence was built on framing himself as the rational, aggrieved party in every dispute. The doorbell chimed with an official, non-negotiable authority. It wasn't the light tap of a friend, it was the firm, sustained ring of law enforcement. Through the study walls, I heard the frantic scramble of people trying to look casual, the clinking of beer bottles being hidden, and the shuffling of baggage being moved. I unlocked my study door and stepped out. I found the group posed in the living room, arranged as if they were about to stage an intervention. Brian had stationed himself by the front door, ready to seize control of the story. Jessica was perched on my sofa, dabbing at her red-streaked eyes, clutching a wad of tissues like a prop. "Good afternoon, officers." Brian opened the door, flashing his practiced charm. "I'm so sorry about this, there's been a significant family misunderstanding. My mother-in-law seems to be having some sort of episode." An episode? Naturally, I was the problem, not the horde of people who had stormed my home. 2 officers stepped inside. The senior one, with graying hair at his temples, identified himself as Officer Johnson. The younger one was Officer Martinez. Their uniformed presence instantly altered the power dynamic in the room. All at once, Brian's confident posture looked phony, Jessica's weeping looked contrived, and the group's casual claiming of my house looked blatantly, unequivocally wrong. "Ma'am, are you the homeowner who reported a trespassing complaint?" Officer Johnson spoke directly to me, his voice professional yet not unkind. "Yes, I am. I'm Eleanor Vance. This is my home." I had retrieved the deed from my study, and my hands were steady. "These individuals arrived here without any invitation and have refused to leave." Officer Martinez did a slow scan of the room, her eyes logging the piles of luggage, the half-empty bottles, and the general state of disarray. "How many people are we referring to?" "There were 15 when they arrived. A few might have left when they heard you approaching." Brian stepped forward, pasting on his most reasonable expression. "Officers, this is just a family disagreement. Eleanor has been under a lot of stress with the move, and I believe she's just overwhelmed by having family visit." "Sir, a family relationship does not supersede property rights," Officer Johnson replied curtly, his eyes on the deed I'd handed him. "The homeowner possesses the legal right to decide who is allowed on her property." That simple, factual statement landed with the force of a physical impact. For the first time all day, someone in authority had affirmed what I'd been saying. This was my house. The decision was mine. Jessica looked utterly bewildered. "But, we're her family. Doesn't that count for anything?" Officer Martinez's face remained impassive. "Ma'am, being family does not entitle you to automatic access to someone's private property without their consent." "Consent?" Brian's voice cracked, his attempt at composure failing. "She's been planning this villa as a place for the family to gather for months. We just assumed." "You assumed incorrectly," Officer Johnson cut him off. He then turned back to me. "Mrs. Vance, do you want these individuals to be removed from your property?" The question hung in the charged silence, a clear and final ultimatum. 15 pairs of eyes locked onto me, some hostile, some pleading, but all finally grasping that their entitlement had no legal standing. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and firm. "I want every single one of them to leave. Immediately." The words felt like setting down a crushing weight I'd been carrying for years. I offered no further explanation, no justification, and no apology for daring to enforce a basic boundary in my own home. Officer Martinez turned to the stunned group. You have 15 minutes to collect your personal items and vacate the premises. Anyone remaining after that time will be placed under arrest for trespassing. The scramble was instantaneous. Mike and Kevin were the first to move, grabbing their beer cooler and muttering hasty apologies as they bolted for the door. Ashley threw a venomous look at Brian as she angrily shoved her things back into her suitcase. Several of the people I didn't even know simply vanished out the door without a word. This is completely absurd, Brian blustered, watching his power evaporate. We drove 4 hours to get here. We had plans. You made plans without checking with the homeowner, Officer Johnson stated flatly. That does not constitute a legal reservation, sir. Jessica was retrieving her belongings from my master bedroom, her movements jerky with fury. Eleanor, you are going to regret this day for the rest of your life. But I felt no regret. All I felt was an overwhelming sense of relief. Watching these strangers haul their possessions out of my private space felt like reclaiming territory that had been seized. Brian made one last, desperate attempt at manipulation as he loaded his SUV. Emily would be absolutely ashamed of what you've become, old woman. Just selfish and bitter. Officer Johnson moved to stand between us. Sir, you need to leave the property now. Any further attempts to contact Mrs. Vance today could be classified as harassment. The last car reversed out of my driveway just as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, bathing my villa in a warm, golden light. Officer Martinez finished up her report while Officer Johnson walked me through the documentation. You'll have a formal report number for your records. If any of them return without your explicit permission, call us immediately. This incident officially establishes a clear pattern of trespassing. After the police cruisers departed, I stood alone in my foyer, enveloped in a profound, welcome silence. The chaos was gone, the stray beer cans, the sandy grit on the floors, the echo of entitled voices claiming what was mine. My phone was buzzing non-stop with furious texts, but I simply switched it off without even looking. For the first time in 6 long years, I had said no, and not immediately apologized for it. I had called for help instead of just enduring the abuse in silence. I had prioritized my own peace over their demands. The ocean waves crashed rhythmically against the shore outside my windows, scrubbing the beach clean with every tide. I knew tomorrow would bring a new kind of battle, angry phone calls, vicious social media posts, extended family demanding I apologize and make peace. But tonight, my home was finally mine again. And that felt like the start of something that bore a striking resemblance to freedom. The deadbolt made a satisfying, final click as I watched the last police car's taillights vanish down the coastal highway into the growing dusk. The incident report felt crisp in my hand, an official piece of paper confirming that I had been right, that my home was mine to govern. Yet, as I stood in the silent foyer, the feeling wasn't triumph, it was a strange, echoing hollowness. The quiet was almost oppressive after the hours of noise. No more shouting, no more footsteps on the marble, no more thumping music from rooms they had no right to enter. There was only the distant rhythm of the surf and the low hum of my air conditioning, the very sounds I had bought this house to enjoy in peace. I moved through my villa like an investigator assessing a crime scene, taking inventory of the invasion's aftermath. Beer cans left on my granite counters, damp towel outlines on the hardwood, my furniture pushed into awkward angles where strangers had rearranged it. In the guest bathroom, a smear of Jessica's foundation stained the marble vanity, a greasy mark of territoriality. The master bedroom, however, felt the most violated. They had moved Emily's photograph from my nightstand, it had been knocked over in their haste to claim my sanctuary. I carefully picked up the silver frame. The glass was cracked, and I studied my daughter's gentle, smiling face through the fractures. Be kind to Brian, Mom, her voice whispered in my memory, he's hurting, too. But Emily had asked for kindness, not for me to become a doormat. She had asked for compassion, not for my complete financial and emotional surrender. Standing in the bedroom where strangers had intended to sleep for 3 weeks, I finally, truly understood that distinction. My phone vibrated aggressively from the kitchen counter where I'd left it. I powered it back on. The screen lit up, 17 missed calls and 43 new text messages. All from one contact, Brian Miller. I read them in sequence, observing his tone morph from feigned, wounded confusion to overt, naked aggression. Eleanor, we need to discuss what you did today. You embarrassed my wife in front of our friends. That is not acceptable. Family does not call the police on family. Emily would be disgusted by this. You think you won today? You have absolutely no idea what's coming. By this time tomorrow, everyone we know will understand what kind of person you've truly become. Enjoy your empty mansion, old woman. It's all you're going to have left. The messages kept coming, each one more venomous than the last. Brian's mask hadn't just slipped, he had torn it off, revealing the manipulative, vindictive person I had been too forgiving to see for 6 years. But now, holding an official trespassing report in one hand and watching his threatening texts accumulate on my phone, I saw his true nature was finally creating its own trail of evidence. I poured myself 3 fingers of good scotch and sank into my leather reading chair, the one angled perfectly to watch the sea. Outside, the sunset was painting the Pacific in strokes of crimson and gold, the daily spectacle I had purchased this villa to witness. But Brian's threats cast a pall over the beauty. Had I been too severe? The doubt gnawed at me, despite the police officer's validation. They were, in some dysfunctional way, family. They were part of Emily's legacy, her husband's new life. By calling the police, had I truly burned bridges that could never be repaired? My phone buzzed again. Another message from Brian. This time, a photo was attached. It was Jessica, crying in the passenger seat of their car, her mascara running in dramatic, black streaks. Look at what you did to her. Are you happy now? I deleted the message and the photo without replying. Jessica's tears might have been real, but so was my bone-deep exhaustion from years of their manipulation. So was my fundamental right to peace in my own home. So was the $290,000 I had given them, for which I had never received so much as a word of genuine thanks, only escalating demands. The scotch settled warm in my chest as I began the ritual of restoring my house. Straightening each piece of furniture felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Wiping down every surface felt like erasing their presumption. The physical labor was a balm, helping me process the emotional aftershock of finally, definitively saying no. But as the evening shadows lengthened into night, a deep unease settled in alongside the satisfaction. Brian's final texts had a chilling certainty that disturbed me more than his earlier, hot-headed rage. You have no idea what's coming. That wasn't the frustrated parting shot of a man who had lost, it was the calculated promise of a man planning his revenge. I had won the battle for my house, but something in his tone made it clear the war was only just beginning. Emily's photo smiled at me from the newly tidied nightstand, her face serene in the lamplight. What would she have made of today? Would she have applauded me for finally standing up for myself? Or would she have seen only the ruin of the family harmony she had always tried so hard to preserve? I think you'd understand, sweetheart, I whispered to her image. You raised me to be generous, but you never raised me to be a fool. My phone lit up one more time, the screen glowing with Brian's name yet again. This time, I switched it off completely, but not before I caught a preview of his last message. Tomorrow everyone will see. The threat hung there, unfinished, in the quiet darkness, promising a new kind of trouble I couldn't yet begin to imagine. Whatever Brian was plotting, it would arrive with the morning light. For tonight, the house was mine. But victory had never felt so fragile. Sunlight poured through my kitchen windows as I reached for the silent phone on the counter to check the time. 8:47 a.m. I had slept terribly, Brian's threats echoing in my restless dreams. The device felt heavy in my hand. I turned it on, and the screen instantly exploded with a cascade of notifications that made my stomach plummet. 47 alerts from Facebook, Instagram, and dozens of new text messages. My email inbox showed countless new messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Something had happened overnight. Something big. I opened Facebook first. Brian's post was the first thing in my feed. The words felt like a physical assault. My mother-in-law kicked her own family out of her house yesterday. Called the police on us, treated us like criminals. Money truly does corrupt people. My late wife Emily would be heartbroken to see what her mother has become. We just wanted to spend time with her in her new mansion, but I guess we're not good enough for her anymore. Prayers needed for our family during this devastating time. The post had already been shared 43 times. The comments flooded the screen, a torrent of accusations. Heartbreaking. I can't believe someone would treat their own family like that. Money is the root of all evil. Poor Jessica and the kids. Kids. There had been no children here yesterday. But Brian's narrative was already being embellished for maximum tragedy. Jessica had uploaded her own video testimonial, clearly filmed in their car right after they'd left, her eyes red and her voice trembling convincingly. I just can't understand how someone who used to love us so much could turn so cold. We brought friends to celebrate with her, to share in her new life, and she treated us like diseased strangers. Emily always used to say her mom was the most generous woman alive. I guess she just never lived to see this side of her. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the replies. Old neighbors from my previous street. Former colleagues from my engineering firm. Even some of Emily's friends from college. All of them were expressing shock, dismay, and profound disappointment in me. The story Brian had woven was simple, emotionally potent, and an absolute lie. But he had told it first, seizing the moral high ground before I even knew the battle had begun. I tried to type a comment on his post, my fingers fumbling on the small screen. This is a complete distortion of the truth. Brian brought 15 people to my home without any invitation or permission. When I asked them to leave, they refused. I was well within my rights. But my comment just looked cold and defensive next to Brian's emotional plea. Within seconds, the replies to my comment appeared. Classic gaslighting, Eleanor. Why are you trying to justify abandoning your family? 15 people? That sounds like a wild exaggeration. Brian's own reply came swiftly, see? Look at how she's trying to rewrite the story. This is the exact kind of cold, manipulative behavior Emily used to cry about in private. Emily, crying about me, in private. The lie was so breathtakingly audacious, so perfectly calculated, that it left me speechless. And people were believing it. They were sharing it, adding their own outraged interpretations. Ashley had shared the post, adding, truly disgusting behavior from an old woman who should know better. Jessica is like a sister to me, and seeing her treated this way is sickening. Mike had added his 2 cents. We literally drove 4 hours just to see family, and we got treated like criminals just for wanting to use her pool. Rich people problems, I guess. A pool party. That's what they were calling their home invasion now. A simple, innocent request to use family facilities, cruelly denied by a bitter old woman with more money than compassion. I sat at my kitchen table, my coffee forgotten, reading comment after comment. People I had known for half my life were questioning my very character based on Brian's meticulously crafted sob story. Former neighbors wrote of their disappointment. Emily's friends wrote about how deceived they felt about my true nature. Margaret Chen, Emily's closest friend from college, had written, Eleanor, I am just shocked. This doesn't sound like the woman Emily always described. What on earth happened to you? I tried messaging her privately. Margaret, please, there is so much more to this. Brian brought 15 people, many of them strangers, to my house without asking. They tried to take my master bedroom and refused to leave. The police confirmed I had every right to have them removed. Her reply came back within the hour. Eleanor, I find it incredibly hard to believe Emily's grieving husband would lie about something this painful. Maybe you should take a hard look at your own behavior instead of blaming everyone else. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Brian had successfully weaponized Emily's memory and their shared network of grief. In this story, he was the suffering widower, the devoted husband still mourning my daughter. I was the cold, wealthy mother-in-law who had abandoned him in his time of need, choosing my new mansion over my family bonds. Every attempt I made to defend myself with facts only made me look worse. Social media rewarded emotional narratives, not legal accuracy, and Brian's tale of a heartbroken family was perfectly engineered for viral sympathy. My dry, factual explanations about property rights sounded petty and cruel against his story of being the victim. By noon, the post had been shared 87 times. Local news blogs were starting to pick up the story, framing it as a human interest piece on family dysfunction within wealthy communities. The comment threads were spawning their own separate discussions, each one amplifying Brian's version of events while dismissing my attempts at clarification. I shut the laptop in frustrated defeat and stared at my study wall, which was lined with my engineering certificates and professional achievement awards. 40 years of professional recognition, community service, and charitable giving, none of it meant anything against a single, manipulative Facebook post designed to provoke maximum emotional outrage. My university diploma hung in its place of honor, the engineering degree that had instilled in me the values of systematic problem-solving and evidence-based analysis. Social media wasn't a world of truth or evidence, it was about narrative control and emotional manipulation. These were skills I had never needed to develop and weapons I had never learned to use. But my engineering background had taught me something crucial: every problem has a solution if you approach it systematically. Brian might have won the first round with his superior social media strategy, but this war would ultimately be decided by facts, documentation, and legal reality. I had to stop playing defense on his chosen battlefield and start building my own case using the tools I understood: evidence, documentation, and professional expertise. The only question was whether I could assemble my defense faster than his lies could spread. I turned away from the glowing screen and faced my wall of professional accomplishments: engineering degrees, project awards, 40 years of systematic problem-solving, all represented in polished frames. Brian might understand social media manipulation, but I understood something far more fundamental: how to break down complex problems into their manageable components and solve them methodically. This was just another engineering challenge. Brian had inadvertently created a structural weakness in his own narrative by building it on a foundation of lies. My job was simply to find that weakness and exploit it with the pressure of hard evidence. I opened my filing cabinet with deliberate precision and retrieved the folder labeled Family Financial Support, a habit from my engineering days of documenting absolutely everything. Inside, bank statements, canceled checks, and wire transfer receipts told the real story in stark black and white numbers. Spreading the documents across my desk in chronological order, I began to calculate: MBA tuition payments, $45,000. A house down payment of $60,000 when Brian's credit rating couldn't secure decent terms. Emily's medical bills during her cancer treatment, $85,000 in documented payments to hospitals and specialists. Car payments, credit card bailouts, and emergency loans that were never repaid. The total reached $290,000 in just 6 years of systematic financial support. These were not gifts given freely between equals. This was an escalating pattern of demands, backed by family guilt and the tragedy of Emily's illness. Every single payment had a date, an amount, and a bank record. Brian had clearly forgotten he was dealing with an engineer who documented everything for tax and estate planning purposes. His emotional Facebook narrative would crumble when confronted with this mountain of financial evidence. I picked up my phone and dialed Howard Brennan, my estate attorney since Emily's death. We had worked together on my will, trust arrangements, and this very property purchase. It was a professional relationship built on mutual respect and careful documentation. Howard, it's Eleanor Vance. I need some advice regarding family financial gifts that have become complicated. Eleanor, it's good to hear from you. What kind of complications are we discussing? My son-in-law has been posting false and defamatory information about me on social media, claiming I abandoned the family. The truth is, I have documentation showing nearly $300,000 in financial support over the last 6 years. There were no loan agreements, I treated them as gifts. Now I'm wondering what my legal options are. Howard's pause on the other end was thoughtful. The distinction between gifts and loans can be legally significant, Eleanor. Without written agreements, debt recovery is difficult. But we have options: detrimental reliance, unjust enrichment, several theories we could explore. Do you have comprehensive documentation? Bank records for every single dollar. Dates, amounts, and the stated purposes. I can clearly show the pattern of his increasing demands and a lifestyle that far exceeded any legitimate income source he had. Excellent. This kind of systematic exploitation might very well fall under elder financial abuse statutes, especially given the pattern and the amounts involved. Let's meet on Monday morning. Bring everything you have. I scheduled the appointment and returned to my document analysis, creating a detailed spreadsheet that revealed the true scope of Brian's financial dependence. His social media posts constantly complained about money problems, while my bank records showed the steady payments that supported his lifestyle. The contradiction was damning. Opening Brian's Facebook page, I began screenshotting his financial complaints and public requests for help, dating back years. Posts about needing money for car repairs, all while I was paying his insurance. Complaints about expensive medical bills, while my accounts showed direct payments to his doctors. It was a clear pattern of public poverty claims completely contradicted by private financial support. Jessica's Instagram revealed even more damaging evidence. Photos of expensive vacations, designer clothes, and meals at high-end restaurants, all funded by the money I had provided while they portrayed themselves as struggling family members deserving of sympathy. By that afternoon, I had assembled a comprehensive file documenting 6 years of financial manipulation, a timeline of payments, screenshots of contradictory social media posts, an analysis of their lifestyle expenses versus their declared income, and evidence of systematic deception spanning years, not just the incident from the other day. Brian's Facebook narrative portrayed me as a wealthy miser who abandoned poor relatives. My documentation showed the exact opposite, a generous mother-in-law who was systematically exploited by manipulative in-laws, who had received nearly $300,000 while portraying themselves as victims. The irony was perfect. Brian's strength, his ability to manipulate public perception, had just created his greatest weakness. Every social media post where he claimed poverty was now evidence of his deception. Every photograph of an expensive purchase was proof of his fraudulent claims of financial need. I organized the final stack of documents into a comprehensive file folder, labeling it B. Miller Financial Recovery, in my precise engineer's handwriting. This would be my opening move, not defensive social media replies, but offensive legal action backed by systematic documentation. Placing the folder in my briefcase for Monday's legal consultation, I glanced at Emily's photo on my desk. Her gentle smile seemed approving, as if she understood that protecting myself wasn't betraying her memory. It was honoring the systematic, careful approach to life she had always admired in me. "I think you'd approve of this approach, sweetheart," I said quietly. "No emotional manipulation. Just facts and evidence." My phone rang with an unknown number, probably another reporter wanting to discuss the family feud that was apparently becoming local news. But I had work to do, documentation to complete, and legal strategies to develop. Brian had chosen the wrong opponent. He'd picked a fight with someone who solved problems for a living, who documented everything, and who understood that sustainable victories require solid foundations, not emotional manipulation. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice, self-protection, and ensuring that systematic exploitation couldn't continue hiding behind claims of family loyalty. The game had changed, and I was finally playing to win. Sunday morning dawned clear and purposeful. I sat at my study desk like a general preparing for a decisive battle. The comprehensive folder labeled B. Miller Financial Recovery was spread before me in organized precision. Coffee steamed beside Emily's photo as I reviewed 6 years of systematic documentation, bank statements, transfer records, and screenshots of Brian's contradictory social media posts claiming poverty while living off my generosity. At 8:30 a.m., I drove to Howard Brennan's downtown office, my briefcase heavy with evidence. The attorney had agreed to an emergency Sunday consultation after I had explained the urgency. Brian's social media campaign was gaining momentum daily, and our legal response required immediate action. "Eleanor, this level of documentation is remarkable," Howard said, spreading my financial records across his mahogany conference table. "Most people don't keep such detailed records of family assistance. 40 years of engineering taught me to document everything." I watched him calculate totals, his eyebrows rising with each page. I just never imagined I'd need it for this purpose. Howard's fingers traced the timeline of escalating demands. MBA tuition, wedding costs, house down payment, medical bills, multiple emergency loans, all without signed agreements or repayment schedules. Brian treated you like a personal bank. The pattern became clear only when I organized it chronologically, I said, pulling out my analysis spreadsheet. Small requests at first, always with promises to repay when things stabilized, but his lifestyle never matched any legitimate income source. Without signed loan agreements, we'll argue detrimental reliance and unjust enrichment, Howard explained, his voice gaining professional excitement. Your documentation proves systematic exploitation. This is an exceptionally strong case. What are my realistic chances of recovery? Howard smiled grimly. With this evidence? Excellent. Brian won't expect this level of preparation. Most family financial disputes lack this kind of documentation. You've built a fortress of facts. We spent 2 hours developing our strategy, a court filing for Monday morning, service of process to catch Brian completely off guard, defamation counterclaims based on his false social media narrative, and a timeline for asset discovery and payment enforcement. At noon, I drove to my bank's main branch, armed with Howard's letter requesting certified transaction records. The branch manager, Patricia Williams, personally handled my sensitive request, understanding the legal implications. Mrs. Vance, these transfer amounts are significant, she noted, reviewing 6 years of electronic payments to Brian Miller's accounts. We'll provide certified copies with official authentication for court submission. The final tally shocked even me. $293,500 in documented transfers, including several large payments I had forgotten about during Emily's final months, emergency room bills, specialist consultations, prescription costs, all paid directly from my accounts while Brian claimed financial hardship on social media. Patricia arranged official bank seals and notarization for each document, creating legal weight evidence that would withstand courtroom scrutiny. These records clearly establish the pattern you described, Mrs. Vance. The court will find them very compelling. From the bank, I drove to the notary's office, where every document received official certification. My sworn affidavit detailed Brian's repeated promises to repay when his business stabilized, promises that disappeared as his demands increased and my daughter's illness worsened. Back home by evening, I organized the final, comprehensive file, chronological evidence of systematic exploitation, legal documentation of false promises, and social media screenshots proving deliberate deception about his financial status. Everything Brian had forgotten about his lies, I had documented and preserved. The irony was perfect. Brian's strength, manipulating public perception through emotional appeals, had created his weakness. Every social media post claiming poverty was now evidence of fraud. Every photograph of expensive purchases contradicted his claims of financial need. I placed the completed legal file in my briefcase, setting my phone alarm for an early courthouse arrival. This wasn't about revenge or anger anymore. This was about justice, accountability, and protecting myself from future exploitation through proper legal channels. Looking at Emily's photo on my desk, I spoke quietly to her gentle smile. Tomorrow I fight back properly, sweetheart. The way you taught me, with integrity and preparation. My phone buzzed with another hostile message from Brian. Still waiting for your apology, old woman. Family doesn't treat family this way. But Brian had no idea what was coming. While he'd been playing social media games, I'd been building an unassailable legal fortress. Engineering had taught me that sustainable victories required solid foundations, careful planning, and methodical execution. Tomorrow would prove that systematic preparation defeats impulsive manipulation. The game had changed completely, and Brian was about to discover he'd chosen the wrong opponent. The war wasn't over, it was just beginning, on my terms. Monday morning arrived with the precision of an engineering timeline. I reached the courthouse at 7:45 a.m., my briefcase loaded with documentation that would transform me from the defendant in the court of public opinion to the plaintiff in the court of law. The filing office opened at 8 a.m. sharp, and I intended to be first in line. Case filing for debt recovery and defamation, I told the clerk, sliding my comprehensive legal package across the counter. She examined the documentation with growing professional appreciation: Howard's legal formatting, the bank certifications, notarized affidavits, and a timeline analysis that read like a forensic accounting report. "This is exceptionally well prepared, Mrs. Vance," she noted, processing my payment and assigning a case number. "Judge Martinez handles debt recovery cases. You'll likely get an expedited hearing due to the quality of this evidence." Service of process was arranged for immediate delivery to Brian's address. While a court officer drove across town to deliver papers that would shatter his confidence, I returned home to launch the second phase of my coordinated attack. My laptop waited on the kitchen table, the Facebook page open to Brian's viral post about family abandonment. Time to counter his emotional manipulation with systematic facts. I crafted my response with engineering precision: no anger, no defensiveness, just documented evidence presented professionally. "I've seen the concerning posts about our family situation. Here are the documented facts." I attached screenshots of bank transfers totaling $293,500, organized chronologically with clear descriptions. These funds were provided freely during difficult times, but recent events have changed everything. I am pursuing legal recovery through proper channels and addressing defamatory statements in court. The post went live at 9:30 a.m., tagged to reach every mutual friend and family member who'd seen Brian's original manipulation. Within minutes, the responses began flooding in: shock, apologies, and demands for Brian to explain the financial evidence he'd conveniently omitted from his sob story. Margaret Chen, Emily's college friend who'd questioned my character, commented immediately: "Eleanor, I had no idea about the financial support. Brian never mentioned any of this. I apologize for judging you without the facts." Other comments followed rapidly: "This changes everything. Why didn't Brian mention the money? Those are serious amounts over 6 years." Eleanor was incredibly generous. I spent the morning methodically contacting witnesses, neighbors who'd seen Friday's invasion, Emily's friends who deserved the full information, my financial advisor who'd processed the large transfers, and professional colleagues who could vouch for my character. Each conversation built another pillar supporting my factual narrative. At 11:15 a.m., my phone rang. Brian's name appeared on the screen, the first time he'd called instead of texting threats. "You filed a lawsuit against me?" His voice carried genuine panic instead of his usual arrogance. "Eleanor, this is family business. We can work this out privately." "Family business ended when you brought 15 strangers to my home and refused to leave," I replied calmly. "Family business ended when you posted lies on social media to destroy my reputation." "Those weren't lies. You did abandon us." "Brian, I have documentation of every dollar, every promise you made to repay, and every social media post where you claimed poverty while spending my money. The court will decide what constitutes truth." Silence stretched across the connection. When Brian spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of control. "What do you want? Money? I can pay some of it back. The court will determine appropriate restitution. My attorney will handle all communication from now on." I ended the call and returned to my social media campaign, posting screenshots of Brian's threatening text messages from Friday night alongside his public claims about wanting family reconciliation. The contradiction was stark: privately threatening an elderly woman while publicly playing the victim of family abandonment. Jessica called next, her voice shaking with tears that sounded genuinely terrified rather than theatrically manipulative. "Eleanor, please. Brian's talking about losing the house, losing everything. Can't we work this out like family?" "Jessica, your husband exploited my grief over Emily's death to systematically extract nearly $300,000 from me. He brought 15 people to my home without permission and called police intervention family abandonment. This stopped being about family the moment he chose manipulation over honesty." By afternoon, the social media landscape had shifted completely. Brian's original post was buried under comments demanding an explanation for the financial evidence. Former supporters were sharing my documentation, expressing shock at the scale of undisclosed financial support. Emily's friends who'd initially supported Brian were now apologizing and questioning his honesty about everything. Brian's social media accounts went silent around 2 p.m., no responses to the mounting questions, no attempts to explain away the financial evidence. The man who had dominated narrative control for days had been neutralized by the simple presentation of documented facts. Howard called at 3:30 p.m. with updates from the court. The judge reviewed your filing, and Brian's lawyer has already called, panicked. He's requesting settlement discussions through counsel. Eleanor, he knows he's lost. This level of documentation in a family financial dispute is unprecedented. Evening brought a final call from an unknown number. Brian's voice was barely recognizable, the confident manipulator replaced by someone facing consequences for the first time in years. Eleanor. I need to talk. Can we meet? Please. The desperation in his voice was complete. But meetings and discussions belonged to the past, when I'd believed family loyalty required unlimited tolerance for exploitation. All communication goes through my attorney now, Brian. You know his contact information. I hung up and walked to my deck, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow would bring more legal proceedings, but the war was essentially over. Brian had brought a social media campaign to a legal documentation fight and discovered the limitations of lies when confronted with certified bank records. Justice was no longer coming. It had arrived. Friday morning, I entered the courthouse with calm confidence, Howard beside me. Across the hallway, Brian sat slumped in a chair beside a harried-looking public defender, his designer sunglasses gone, his arrogant posture collapsed into defeated resignation. The transformation was remarkable. 5 days ago, he'd controlled the narrative and treated my home like conquered territory. Now he looked like what he'd always been, a man who'd built his lifestyle on someone else's generosity and was facing consequences for the first time. Judge Martinez reviewed the case file. Mrs. Vance, your documentation is extraordinarily comprehensive. Mr. Miller, your counsel indicates you wish to avoid trial through settlement? Brian's attorney attempted a weak defense. Your Honor, my client maintains these were family gifts, given freely during times of mutual grief. Counselor, Judge Martinez replied, holding up screenshots of Brian's own social media posts, your client's statements contradict that position. Here he claims financial hardship while bank records show systematic support. Here he promises repayment. Furthermore, the defamatory social media campaign attempted to destroy Mrs. Vance's reputation through deliberate omission of material facts. This constitutes both unjust enrichment and defamation. Brian's attorney requested a recess. 20 minutes later, they returned with a settlement proposal, $150,000 in restitution, a public retraction of all social media statements, and a cessation of all defamatory communication. Mrs. Vance, Judge Martinez asked, do you find this proposal acceptable? I looked at Brian's defeated face, remembering Emily's gentle voice asking me to be kind, Mom, he's hurting too. But Emily had never asked me to be a doormat. She'd requested kindness, not unlimited financial exploitation. I accept the settlement, Your Honor. Justice doesn't require destroying someone, just holding them accountable. The judge entered the agreement into the official record. Brian would have 30 days to begin payments or face asset seizure. His required public retraction would be posted to all social media platforms where he'd spread his false narrative. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt Emily's presence more clearly than I had since her death. Not the manipulated memory Brian had weaponized, but her genuine spirit, generous but wise, kind but not naive. Back at my villa, I posted the court decision to social media, with dignity rather than vindictiveness. Our family legal matter has been resolved through proper channels. I'm grateful for everyone's support and look forward to moving forward with renewed appreciation for honest relationships. The response was overwhelming. Emily's friends expressed relief. Former supporters of Brian apologized for believing incomplete information. Brian's required public retraction appeared that evening, a brief, legally mandated acknowledgement that his previous posts contained inaccurate and incomplete information. His social media presence, once commanding, was reduced to court-ordered damage control. That evening brought a phone call from my nephew David, Emily's cousin. Aunt Eleanor, I saw the news about everything. I wanted to call and say, Well, I always wondered how Brian afforded his lifestyle. I'm sorry you went through this, but I'm glad you stood up for yourself. Thank you, David. And you are always welcome to visit, with a proper invitation and a discussion of dates that work for both of us. His laugh was warm and genuine. That sounds perfect. How about next weekend? I'd love to see your new place. I checked my calendar, noting the simple pleasure of being asked rather than commanded. Next weekend works beautifully. I'll prepare the guest room properly. As sunset painted my deck in golden light, I sat with a glass of wine and watched the peaceful waves roll towards the shore. My phone stayed silent. No threatening messages, no manipulative demands. The villa felt truly mine for the first time, not just by property deed, but emotionally mine, through boundaries properly established and maintained. My generosity hadn't been destroyed by setting limits, it had been refined, focused toward relationships built on mutual respect. I raised my wine glass toward Emily's photo. I think you'd approve, sweetheart. I learned the difference between being generous and being taken advantage of. The ocean waves washed the beach clean, carrying away debris and leaving fresh sand for tomorrow. 6 years of systematic exploitation had ended not through anger, but through systematic preparation, legal process, and the simple recognition that kindness requires wisdom. Brian would make his payments. I would enjoy my earned retirement, welcome genuine family visits, and maintain the generous spirit Emily had loved, tempered now with the boundaries that made generosity sustainable. Justice had been served, peace had been restored, and for the first time in years, I looked forward to tomorrow with uncompromised hope. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments.